The United Kingdom's colonial past has left remnants of Sikh and Punjabi history across London, with traces of a once powerful empire and its influential figures commemorated throughout the city. And today I'm taking you guys along with me as I roam around London to find these artifacts and historic sites. But first, let's start with a brief history of Punjab. The region of Punjab is a land of rich history and culture. Situated in North India, Punjab borders Pakistan and Jammu and Kashmir. It's known as the breadbasket of India for its fertile land, and it was home to the once powerful Sikh Empire, the last major empire and region to be conquered by the British East India Company in 1849. The Sikh Empire comprised of Sikh confederacies that were unified by Maharaja Ranjit Singh. He was known as the Lion of Punjab and the first Maharaja of the Sikh Empire. After his death in 1839, the empire went into a period of rapid decline, which was caused by political divisions. Then followed two Anglo-Sikh wars between the British East India Company and the Sikh Empire. The second war was lost by the Sikh Empire in 1849. The empire was divided into individual princely states by the now titled British provinces of Punjab, and a short period later, India was colonized by the British, and the British Raj lasted from 1858 to 1947. During the annexation of Punjab, many cultural and historic artifacts were seized and sent to London to be displayed extravagantly as treasures of the British Empire. And one such treasure is Maharaja Ranjit Singh's throne, which is currently exhibited at the Victoria and Albert Museum in London. The easiest way to get to the museum is by tube. The District and Piccadilly lines stop right at South Kensington. The station is about a 5-minute walk from the museum. V&A isn't the only worthwhile site in South Kensington. Next door is the Natural History Museum, and a short walk away is Hyde Park. Entry to the permanent collection at V&A is free. You can usually get in at the door, but I'd recommend booking tickets for weekend visits, or else you might have to wait in line. To get to the South Asia collection, take a right at the entrance, where Maharaja Ranjit Singh's throne can be found. And here it is. The throne was designed to reflect the humble character of Maharaja Ranjit Singh. The throne was made between 1820 to 1830 by the goldsmith Hafiz Muhammad Multani in celebration of conquering Multan. The throne was one of many extravagancies owned by Maharaja Ranjit Singh. When the English annexed Punjab, the throne was stolen from the royal treasury. The throne was shipped to London in 1853 and was first displayed at the Indian Museum in London, and later moved to the Victoria and Albert Museum in 1879. The exhibition has several other artifacts collected from different states across India. There's loads more to see at V&A, so I'd recommend strolling around the museum to get a glimpse of the grand collection. But we have to move on to the next site, which is related to the lineage of Maharaja Ranjit Singh. So, Maharaja Ranjit Singh is one of the most prominent figures in Punjab's history, because under his rule, the Sikh Empire prospered and reached the height of its power. His leadership strengthened the Sikh Empire through various reformations, modernization, harmonizing citizens through religious tolerance, and building economic stability. His success as a leader made him a known figure across India. After his death in 1839, he was succeeded by his sons, whose mismanagement led to the decline of the Sikh Empire. By the end of the Second Anglo-Sikh War, Maharaja Ranjit Singh's youngest son, Duleep Singh, was in power. He was only 5 at the time of annexation, and at the age of 11, he was forced to abdicate, and the Sikh Empire was handed to the East India Company. Maharaja Duleep Singh was then exiled to Britain and spent his formative years in England. His education, upbringing, and lifestyle were all funded by the British royal family, and he was closely monitored by the state. He was deeply indoctrinated by British life, far removed from his Sikh heritage and constrained to the point where he wasn't allowed to see his mother or interact with other Indians. I always knew Britain had close ties with India, but I never realized how embedded Sikhs were in higher British society, especially Maharaja Duleep Singh and his family. When I'm traveling, I often read up the history of the city and learn of the figures that changed the fabric of society. And when I was doing research for this video, I was amazed by the history that our community has left all over the world. So we're small, but we're mighty. So Maharaja Duleep Singh married twice and had 8 children, and one stands out in particular for her significant contribution in the women's suffrage movement in the UK, and that is Princess Sophia Duleep Singh. The suffrage movement sought the right for women to vote in public elections in the United Kingdom. As a suffragette, she fought alongside notable British activists such as Emmeline Pankhurst and Millicent Fawcett, who were catalysts of the suffrage movement in Britain in the early 1900s. The suffragettes were activists that used methods of civil disobedience to support their cause. So Sophia rebelled by auctioning off her expensive possessions to fund feminist political organizations, and by not paying taxes, participating in controversial public events, and selling feminist newspapers outside of royal property. Sophia defied the royal family, that I find so admirable, especially coming from a woman of her stature. And so this takes us to our next stop on our trail, Parliament Square in Westminster. If you're coming from V&A, get the eastbound District line and get off at Westminster Station. This is one of London's busiest tourist spots because you've got the London Eye across the river, Westminster Abbey, Big Ben, and the Houses of Parliament. So once again, you might need the whole day to explore this area. Use the Bridge Street North exit and walk towards Parliament Square. In 2015, this statue was put up to commemorate Millicent Fawcett and the women that had a significant role in the women's suffrage movement. And along the plinth of the statue, there is a photo of Sophia. And if you look right here in the corner, you'll find my girl, Princess Sophia Duleep Singh. How cool is that? But her philanthropic acts didn't stop there. During World War I, Sophia volunteered as a British Red Cross nurse and tended to Indian soldiers. During her visits to India, Sophia formed friendships with and supported the pioneers of the Indian independence movement. I didn't know much beyond the basic background of Maharaja Duleep Singh and his family until I started doing research for this video, and I came across Sophia Duleep Singh. And as I was putting together this video, it really hit me that often as minorities, we feel far removed from Western history because of the way it's commemorated and taught in schools. Monumental contributions of minorities are often overlooked, and the lacking acknowledgement of our involvement in historic events erases our efforts that shaped the modern world. Take, for example, the massive Indian army that fought on behalf of Britain in World War I. When I was taught about World War I in high school, not once was there a mention of the huge contribution that the Indian army played to the success of many battles. At that time, Sikhs comprised of 2% of the Indian population, yet 22% of the Indian army consisted of Sikhs. And until recent years, there were limited public records of Indian soldiers available, leaving personal and family histories of Punjab war veterans mostly unknown. When traveling through Europe or even North America, there's a rare presence of minority groups and historical commemorations. So to learn of a Sikh princess that used her power to do good and honor her Sikh heritage, for me at least, was really empowering. So Sophia was present at the numerous women's parliament meetings at Caxton Hall, which is the last stop on this historic trail. Interestingly enough though, Caxton Hall holds a great significance for the Punjabi community for 2 separate but unrelated events. And pictured here in the early 1900s is the Women's Parliament taking place inside of Caxton Hall. And 4 decades later, in 1940, Sardar Udham Singh carried out an assassination to avenge the gruesome Jallianwala Bagh massacre. In this very same building, right behind me, you will see Caxton Hall. Sardar Udham Singh was one of the greatest revolutionaries in the Indian independence movement. His many efforts to free India from the British rule invoked change and inspired other revolutionaries to join the movement. But he is most famously known for assassinating Michael O'Dwyer. A little background. In April 1919, 20,000 unarmed people gathered in Jallianwala Bagh to celebrate Vaisakhi. They were also gathered to peacefully protest the arrest of 2 pro-independence leaders, protesters. In response to the gathering, the British Indian Army opened fire at the crowd, killing over 1,000 women, children, and men, and a substantial number of protesters were injured. The British took little to no accountability for the massacre, and that event sparked radical animosity amongst the Indian towards the British, which led to even more efforts to eradicate British rule over India. Udham Singh was present at Jallianwala Bagh, witnessing the atrocity inflicted on thousands of innocent people. He then plotted to assassinate Michael O'Dwyer, who was the Lieutenant Governor of Punjab from 1913 to 1919. According to historic accounts, O'Dwyer deemed it necessary to strike terror among the people and endorsed the decision to send an army into Jallianwala Bagh. So after the massacre of Jallianwala Bagh, Udham Singh traveled across Europe, Africa, and North America. His objective was to mobilize armed resistance against the British rule over India, and he became involved in revolutionary politics. He joined the Gadar Party, an international political party formed by non-resident Indians in the US and Canada. The party primarily comprised of Punjabis, but it quickly gained momentum amongst other global Indian communities. After a series of arrests, travels, and insurgency, Udham Singh made his way to London. You'll find Caxton Hall a short walk away from Parliament Square. From the tube, you'll want to get off at St. James's Park on the District and Circle lines. As you exit the station, Caxton Hall is about a 2-minute walk away. Inside this historic building on March 13, 1940, Udham Singh shot and killed Michael O'Dwyer. Known as the patient assassin, Udham Singh waited 20 years before executing his revenge. That day, Udham Singh attended a meeting between the East India Association and Central Asian Society, where O'Dwyer was scheduled to speak. At the end of the meeting, Udham Singh fired 2 shots at O'Dwyer. Udham Singh was arrested immediately but did not resist being detained. Udham Singh was in custody at Brixton Prison in South London and called himself Ram Mohammed Singh Azad to represent the 3 major religions in India, followed by Azad, which translates to free. He was sentenced to death and was hanged at Pentonville Prison on July 30th, 1940. During his trial, Udham Singh made a powerful speech condemning British imperialism. His speech was denounced by the judge, who wanted to refrain from releasing transcripts to the press. But political activists from the Indian Workers' Association campaigned to publish his statement. When asked about his motives behind the assassination, Udham Singh responded, "I did it because I had a grudge against him. He wanted to crush the spirit of my people, so I have crushed him. I'm not scared of death. I am dying for my country. I have seen my people starving in India under the British rule. I have protested against this. It was my duty." There is so much to be said about the remarkable life of Udham Singh. His courage, determination, and heroic character is still admired and celebrated in India today. I couldn't possibly fit it all in this video, but I've added some great articles in the description if you want to do any further reading on Udham Singh. There's also a list of references I've used to write this video. There are numerous other sites scattered around the United Kingdom that hold a significant place in Sikh history. Some other notable sites are the Tower of London, where the Kohinoor diamond is housed. The Kohinoor diamond is one of the largest cut diamonds in the world and once belonged to Maharaja Duleep Singh until the British annexed Punjab, when it was seized and brought to Britain. It is now set in the crown of the Queen Mother. Another notable site is Elvedon Church, where Maharaja Duleep Singh is buried. The church is about a 2-hour drive from London. Doing research for this video was a very enlightening experience. I actually ended up going down a few rabbit holes and filled gaps in my prior knowledge of Sikh history. One of the best parts of the research process was going through the Indian Office records at the British Library and coming across archives dating back to the 1890s. The private papers collection had copies of letters sent between government officials discussing Bhagat Singh, Udham Singh, and other freedom fighters. And in these letters, they expressed their concern about the rising influence of the independence movement. It was surreal to be reading these letters almost 75 years post-independence, making the sacrifice and bravery of these heroic figures ever more evocative and resonant. Each of the historic figures I mentioned in this video embodied strength, bravery, and courage. I feel incredibly proud to be part of the Sikh community and fortunate to be able to explore and engage with Sikh history in such depth. I was reminded of their sacrifices, which allow me to be here today. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed this video and were able to learn something just like I did when I was filming this. And if you have any other recommendations or any site that I may have missed out, please let me know in the comments below. As always, you know the drill. Give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Cheers and thanks for tuning in.